My name is Dr. Michael Brown, and this is 3 Words, a bite-sized podcast about the significant and strategic choices that all of us can make in order to be fully alive. Today in the studio, I'm with my friend Dan Costello, who encourages us to embrace the perspective that people are not interruptions, that actually he poses the idea that at the end of life, it's the only thing we're really talking about and the only thing that truly matters in regards to our legacy. And so the question is, why do we not live like that on a daily basis? That was the conversation we had. It's provocative, it's compelling, and it's deeply meaningful to me, and I'm guessing to you as you listen in now. So Dan, it's great to have you back in the studio once again with 3 Words Podcast. You are a very common guest, but I'm just going to be honest with you, my friend. I've missed you. You have been so busy in your role professionally, and obviously this was kind of our time to catch up off camera before we jumped into a really significant conversation. But I'm also guessing with all the new followers of 3 Words Podcast, there's going to be probably a ton of people who don't know who you are.
Sure.
So just to bring everyone up to speed, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name's Dan Costello. I'm the director of purchasing at Dana, an automotive company, and also work as a D&B life coach. I'm married to my wife, Laura, and we have 3 beautiful children, and that's as simple as it gets with me.
No, but I love that because you're doing both your career as well as your calling, and they're just intersecting all over the place. Life coaching, consulting, as well as leading and providing real value in the automotive industry. Business. So I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. In fact, you drove from Michigan just to be with me today here in the studio, and I appreciate you taking the time because we're going to have a really fun, in knowing you as I do, we're going to have a really engaging conversation around these 3 words.
People aren't interruptions.
People aren't interruptions. When I saw this hit my schedule, that I was going to have this conversation with you, I was super excited. And I've been thinking about it, honestly, all day. You know, here we are in the studio in the evening after work hours, and I've been thinking, what does it look like in my day when I'm really living out this idea? And so to be fully transparent, before I came here to the studio, I spent a couple hours working out at the rec center and the gym, and I was just saying to myself, okay, I'm not going to allow the people around me to be interruptions to my workout. Because the reality is, where I work out, I know a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm always interacting. And I'm just going to tell you, I had a great conversation with Jason. I met Jason, an aviation major at the university, and he was just initiating with me. He initiated with me in the locker room. We had a great conversation. And then I met Dom. Dom actually approached me, pulls me over, and he says...
So these are all people that you don't know?
These were
just like random people.
Random person. Good. This gentleman named Dom pulls me over and says, "Are you Laura's dad?" So I have a daughter who we actually knew, and we didn't know that we had a common connection. Obviously, my daughter's connected to him, and that was a fantastic conversation. And then there was a young man, and I won't mention his name, but he came up to me and he says, "Hey, Dr. Brown, I'm glad I saw you. I just want to let you know that I scheduled a counseling appointment. My first counseling appointment just a couple days from now because I've been going through a lot." And I found myself a little bit in this tense moment, like, this sounds like a longer conversation than hello and goodbye. Somewhere. Yeah. So I just paused. I thought about our conversation, and I pulled the AirPod out of my ear and I said, "Really? Tell me more." And so I was really trying to live out, because I love people and I love being fully engaged with people, but I was just trying to live out, even in advance, what this might look like and what this might feel like in the midst of the day. And so that's me. Why is this conversation so important to you as a busy executive in a very large company?
Sure. I love the stories, first of all. I think it's exciting to just kind of hear that you're just the last hour of your day has been kind of a little bit chaotic like this and interruptions everywhere. I always feel like whenever I do these episodes on 3 Words, I have to hedge a little bit because, I know that I'm not, perfect in my belief that people aren't interruptions. And it's funny because we do these 3 words and we always say, hey, these are 3 words that could change your life. Could. If you implement them, right? It's not just something that every day I wake up, I'm like, people aren't interruptions, so I will not be rude to people. And when people come into my office and knock on the door, I'm always letting them in and say, yes, of course I have time for you, So I feel like I have to hedge, but also I love this dialogue we get to have because it always reminds me, like, the value of a human being, the value of being in a space, a personal space with an individual who might have a concern or who might just want to be listened to or who might just need, a friend to talk to.
For sure.
So the reason why it's important to me is because when I think about that every person has value, I am always saying to myself, begin, like anything that I want to do, I want to begin with the end in mind. So what I mean by that is I don't want to just make decisions in my life that are just, it sounds good. People aren't interruptions sounds like a great life coaching tip. But like, I truly believe that, beginning with the end in mind, that I know at the end of my life, I'm not going to be thinking about all the things that I've accomplished. I'm not going to be wondering, what are people going to remember me for? For the, I work in purchasing, all the contracts that I've signed, all the great things that I've accomplished in my career. I'm going to be thinking about who are the people that I influenced? Mm-hmm. Who are the friends that I've made? Who, my kids. How have I intentionally imparted wisdom to my children? And if my kids or my friends or my coworkers always feel like they are interruptions to me, meaning that they feel that way, that means every time, they come to me that they feel that they're being a burden to me. And that would be a terrible way for me to like finish my life and think like, goodness, what people remembered about me was that I was always busy and that they were always a burden to me because I was too busy to pay attention to them. So when I step back thinking about that, that's why it's like at the end of my life, we're, just thinking about what is a legacy. And, people will leave legacies. And I think a lot of people try to leave a legacy by doing a lot of things, by accomplishing certain things, by achieving certain metrics.
Yeah.
But honestly, people are remembered for the people that they impact.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I'm always asking myself at work and in my life is, am I influencing more than I'm being influenced? Mm-hmm. Not that I don't want to be influenced, because I think obviously I want to be influenced and, I want to learn. It's not like I don't want to learn, but also I feel like I've been given a gift of, helping impart wisdom and helping people. I should be using that and be intentional about influencing people. And that's kind of where it comes from me.
Ironically, I'm actually going to pause here and interrupt the podcast to talk about people aren't interruptions and encourage you to, first of all, think about someone who maybe you have pushed to the side that you want to engage with more deeply. Send them a link to this particular episode and then have a genuine conversation about it. Now back to our conversation. Well, I appreciate you reminding us of what is most important in life because, sadly, I have been to several funerals in the last 5 to 7 years. And as I listen carefully to people and individuals' tributes to those who have passed on to the next life, the only thing they're talking about is relationships. The only thing that they're talking about is human connection. It's one of the reasons, as you know, I carry a black marble in my right pocket every day. Yeah. I actually have next to my bed at night a big bowl of marbles that represent all the days of my life. And every day I grab one of those marbles and stick one in my pocket. And then I'm reminded to be fully present in this moment. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if I've ever shared this on the podcast, but I have one priority, or I should say an ultimate priority within every one of those marbles. And the ultimate priority that I'm trying to continually remind myself of, because like you said, we forget.
Right.
We often forget, is remind myself that my priority today is human connection. It's the only thing that actually ultimately matters. In fact, one of our podcast guests, one of my good friends, Steve Risky, he shared this with me years ago and it has stuck with me. I give credit where credit is due, where he said, if you believe in an afterlife and you believe that people exist forever, that every conversation you have literally has an impact for billions and trillions and hundreds of trillions of years.
Right.
There's nothing else that we can do on this earth that has that kind of value or that kind of lasting impact. And so every human being that I'm interacting with, I just have this feeling when I remember, because I don't always remember like you do. We don't do this perfectly, but when I am in that space, mental space, I'm reminded that this conversation with this human being who's going to live forever in spirit form or whatever afterlife you believe in is going to exist forever. It matters. I can't say that can be an interruption. And I know a lot of my friends, even who work in business and, I work in higher education. It's so easy to say, I wish people would just leave me alone so I can get my job done. I got so much work to do. I wish people would leave me alone.
Yeah.
But at the very essence, whether it is in, the automotive industry or in life coaching or sports psychology or higher ed or customer service, people are the priority.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what keeps all businesses going. And what's interesting that you talk about that people would feel like that they were a burden to you, Dan. First of all, knowing you, I can't imagine that ever being the case with your children.
Right, it's
or
just
your
a
wife.
fear, right? It's a fear that I would never want that to be the case, right?
Well, and it is for many people, though, the reality in that the typical American spends the first 60 years of their lives not really tending to their physical well-being and marginalizing their important relationships in order to advance their career and make money. And then often we spend the last 20 or 30 years of our life, and we even have that, trying to make up for it and basically spending all of our money to gain back our physical well-being and our human relationships. And so it's this vicious cycle. I want to invest now in those relationships. But it's hard. I'm sure those who are listening to us and are viewing us on the YouTube channel are probably thinking, I believe that theoretically, but it is so hard. And we're busy people, like you said, and I'm sure you feel that every day at work.
Sure, yeah. And like even what you said is so backwards. Like thinking about this idea, like I was recently reading this book by a guy named John Tyson called The Intentional Father. He's a Christian author, pastor in New York City, leads a church there. And he just talks about how like, for some reason, we've created this culture where our families are supposed to sacrifice for, the breadwinner in the family, right? That, dad's got to move here for another job. Dad's got to do this, or dad's got to work long hours, and he's doing it for the family. And I'm not trying to knock that in any way, shape, or form, because I work, long hours and I do this and my family makes sacrifices for me. But the point that he brought is like, what if we shifted the paradigm to be like, what if we were sacrificing for our families and we were making intentional steps to make sacrifices for my kids, like, and those types of things, instead of them always having to sacrifice for me because of, not having enough time with me, I would make sacrifices that I would be intentional and be present and be with my kids and be with my family. Now, I'm not saying that means I have to, quit my job, or I have to, come home every day at 2:00 to make sure that my kids know that I love them. But there's just a level of understanding of like, people aren't interruptions, right? Yeah. I need to make sure that my kids feel like they're not a burden to me, but they are a delight to me. I want to be engaged with them. I want to be with them, right? Yeah.
Well, and I'm thinking of several other episodes and conversations we've had here in 3 Words Podcast. I think of episode 2, Be Fully Present.
Yeah.
The most amazing gift that we can give to any human being is to be fully present in their presence. I can't help but think about the episode Initiate with Strangers, right? Because obviously we typically avoid strangers and ignore strangers because maybe our family, no one's going to say, well, their spouse or their children or their best friends are interruptions.
Right.
But the person at the airport and the person who is in front of me in the gas line, those could feel like interruptions. And yet the reality is every single one of our best friends today was once a stranger. We never know where those conversations are going to go. I love how you said flip the script, or even think about things where you think of things backward. Right. What if we actually showed up every day into our lives and stepped into our day with actually the opposite perspective, that people are the priority and everything else potentially could be an interruption to that.
Yeah.
That whole paradigm.
That's a game changer.
Yeah.
Right?
It's because, again, it's about perspective. Because I think here's what's interesting. Everyone I talk to about the priority of people and relationships, I have never once in my 30 years of doing this kind of work had someone disagree.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that. Everyone agrees with the fact that people ultimately, relationships ultimately, family, friends ultimately are most important. And yet we don't live every day as though that is true. So for me, it's a marble in my pocket. For you, it might be something else. But
you want to know why?
Why?
It's because it's hard. People are messy. People have problems. People need help.
People can be annoying.
Yeah. All these things. Like
my children can be loud.
Yeah. Like I'm even thinking about I know we keep talking about my kids, but like I think about my kids, like what if I entered into their space, in an intent to learn and also to impart wisdom, but not just as being annoyed of that. I don't want, like I have young kids. So everyone's going to have a different perspective on this right now.
I've been there and done that, but not anymore.
The young kids, you know what I mean? Like sure. I'm not going to, learn how to play with Buzz Lightyear for the rest of my life, but I could learn something from being with my kid and being on his level and understanding the things that he enjoys and being intentional with him and those things that he enjoys. But again, he's also all my kids are crazy. They're wild. They can get in my way. They can be annoying. They can be an interruption.
So if you're a parent listening to this podcast already, you're going, amen. I'm totally resonating with that. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and do a preview. I've never done this before, but I'm going to give a preview. There is an episode coming down the road. We've not recorded it. We've not taped it, but the 3 words will be enjoy your children. And it was actually initiated with me. Someone came to me and said, I would like to do an episode with you about this. And this is why. This father actually was now in charge of his young son, who wasn't even a year old, because his wife was actually going to go on a trip. And he was locked in, and he was thinking to himself, I need to be a good dad, and I need to be present, and I need to make sure that I don't mess anything up horribly with this baby. And then one night, when he was tucking him into bed, he realized, there's actually a grander goal. There's a bigger priority, and that is to actually not just take care of my child, but to enjoy him. And so when I think about people being interruptions, oftentimes, like you just said, they're messy. It's a lot less messy to clean out my inbox on my email. It's a lot less messy to check off the to-do list. I'm going to run this errand. I'm going to wash the car. I'm going to mow the grass. I'm going to do these things. Those are within our control. But you've actually brought up a very interesting twist to this conversation, Dan. One of the reasons that people can oftentimes feel like interruptions is because there's not necessarily a prescribed or predicted time frame to which a conversation might be.
Yeah.
So if someone does approach me randomly at the student rec center and the gym and starts a conversation, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this could be a moment, this could be a minute, or it could be a while, right? So part of it, that's what I think makes it feel, like you said it perfectly, like an interruption, because human beings aren't going to stay within that really cookie cutter, very specific package of time. And it takes a certain amount of energy that doesn't require to run an errand and so forth.
And after that interruption, you might, the interruption that you would call an interruption, but after that conversation, you might walk away and be like, I feel like I didn't really help that person. Or I feel like that wasn't very valuable time spent with that individual. Did that person really gain? I think we're always, at least me, because I'm my number one strength on the Strengths Finder is developer. I'm always wanting to know after the conversation, after the engagement with that individual, did they leave feeling impacted, feeling, influenced, and feeling in a way that was, better off than where I left them when they came, right?
Yeah.
And
that's the developer talking right there, because you're wanting to develop, right?
That's what I want. But at the same time, there's times where I finish, I'm like, I don't know if anything got through, or I don't know if, my approach was wrong, but at the end of the day, it's not up to me to make all those things work. It's just up to me to be available, to be listening, and to be with them in that moment.
You just said it. And that's what I was going to just follow up to your really wise comments, is to be available, to be with, and to be present.
Yeah.
In fact, if the goal, if the bar of success was, I'm going to see you and I'm going to be present with you,
right?
That is the win.
That's enough.
Now, if there's some development, or there's some mentoring, or there's some encouragement, or there's some problem solving, or there's some, with our children, instruction and mentor, whatever those things might be, parental discipline. Yeah, those are all bonus. But what if our goal, I just get so excited thinking about that. I literally get chills, is thinking about every human being. What if my priority was that they would be seen by me? And I would be present with them, even if it's for a minute. So it's just a passing comment. I'm going to be present with you. In fact, just interestingly, if I may, I was with the CEO of a company this past Friday, and we were talking about templates, templates for hiring, templates for development, professional development. And I shared with this CEO 5 things to think about: personality, who I am; passion, what I care about; proficiency, what I'm trained to do; performance, what I actually do. And then there's the 5th one: presence.
Yeah.
How do people feel around me?
That's so important.
Which is a more ambiguous. I mean, if I'm like, here's your performance criteria.
Yeah, you can't. That's not a metric that you can measure very well.
Yeah,
right?
but we all know it. We all know it when we're in the presence of someone who does not feel as though people are interruptions. When they're present, when they're there, when they're here.
Yeah.
That's the value.
This is maybe just a comment on this, because I think this is the most important part of this. If there's anything that the listeners can take from this,
wrap us up. We'll let you have that closing thought.
It would be this. So being available. So even just this past weekend, my wife and I, we just had a weekend away. We went skiing down south, and we stayed at a hotel, and this hotel had a valet service, and that was because there was no parking in the streets. It was downtown, so that was just the way it was. But anyway, she walked to the breakfast spot to get a table, and then I waited for the valet to, get the car to me so that I could drive away and park to where the restaurant was. It was just a few, steps down. Well, the valet driver came out, and he just saw me, and he was like, "Hey, I'm running a marathon." And I'm like, I've not met this kid. I've not introduced myself. He just had to tell me, "Hey, I'm running a marathon." And I thought to myself, I was like, I could say, "Cool," and just like, "Thanks," and get my keys, get in the car, and drive to breakfast, because I was going to have breakfast with my wife. That's important.
And your wife was waiting.
She's waiting for me. But he obviously wanted to engage. He wanted me to ask, "Oh, cool. When is the marathon? What's your name?" So we ended up having this conversation, and it was a great conversation. I was asking him questions because I saw he had a wristband on it, had a Bible verse on it. And so I was asking him, we talked about our faith a little bit, and it was cool. And ultimately, nothing came out of the conversation. It wasn't anything monumental, but I was available to have that conversation. So I get back to the breakfast spot, and my wife is laughing. She's like, "You just have one of those faces that people want to talk to." And I was like, that's a funny thing to say, but you know what? At the end of the day, I think there's something to be said about that. I'm not saying about my face as a face that's to be talked to, but like, be available, be inviting, and just as simple as smiling, looking people in the eyes. If you truly want people not to feel like an interruption, then intentionally look in their eyes, intentionally smile, intentionally invite them into the space that you're in, and let them know that this is not like, I'm not putting up a wall. I'm not going to say you can't talk to me because I don't know you. Like, I'm open to hearing from you and talking to you as much as you're willing to. And I think if we have a presence like that, like you say, people will feel like, not only do I want to talk to this individual, but I want to learn from this individual. And that is my greatest desire. Not just to teach people things, but my greatest desire is that people would trust me to engage in a conversation and to go deeper in a relationship so that it would better both of us. You know what I mean?
Well, I am deeply encouraged by our conversation today, Dan, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers are as well. And as always, it's a pleasure having you in the studio. Thanks for taking time in the midst of your busy schedule that I wasn't, and 3 Words Podcast today was not an interruption to your very full and robust life. But I look forward to our next conversation and future episodes, my friend.
Yeah, me too.
My friends, it was great to be with you today here in the 3 Words Podcast studio. I hope that you were encouraged by my conversation with Dan, and that even you're feeling in your own life that you aren't an interruption to the people that you most care about. I want to encourage you that if you want to hear more from us or want to continue to have a conversation with D&B Coaching and those of us who are interacting here regularly on 3 Words Podcast, would you do me a favor? Just go to dmbcoaching.com/subscribe, and you can actually receive every single month our digital newsletter with free content, encouragement, inspiration, and very practical steps to being the very, very best version of yourself. Again, it was a pleasure being with you today, and we look forward to seeing you again very, very soon.